Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on transitioning to Blue Justice, organized by TBTI Global. I would like to welcome everyone to the session, and we have a full-packed program today, and I hope that many of you have enjoyed the events for today, many sessions on justice and equity. So for this particular session, we are very happy and very pleased to talk about this topic of blue justice as part of the work that Tubik Jogna has been working on. And this is basically what we would like to share with you today, which is the story about the blue justice that we have been working on. So what we are doing today is to share with you the following. We would start with Professor Sven Jenthoff, who would speak about why blue justice and how to look at it. And I would leave him to explain why we're putting this session together as well. Then we would have three sections in our session. The first one would start with video presentations about the case studies of blue justice in Japan, Turks and Caicos, and in Chile. And then we invite our speakers to speak particularly to the justice issues and the situations and the challenges facing small-scale fisheries in those case studies. Then we would have section 2 that would be talking about justice issues in 3 orders. And after Sven's presentation, you would have a bit of an appreciation about what it's all about. The invitation that I would have to our speakers from Brazil and in Amazon and in Canada is to say how this kind of theoretical and analytical lens can be useful in unpacking social or justice issues in small-scale fisheries. And the final section would be another set of videos about justice issues in South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal. And then we'd have the speakers or the authors of these case studies to speak to us on the topic of what do we need to do to transition to blue justice. So during this section, with all the roundtable discussion at each of the section, we would invite our audience to send in questions through the Q&A box. And if you'd like to, say hello in the chat, that would be quite all right as well. But please direct all the questions to the Q&A, and that would be a lot easier for us to note. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we look forward to very rich and insightful discussion about blue justice and how to transition to it for small-scale fisheries of the world. Sven, please turn on your camera and your microphone and start the presentation.
Hello, I hope this works. I'm Sven Jenthoff, and I'm talking to you from North Norway at the moment, where I live. I want to talk to you about a new book that we have in the pipeline. But before I do that, I just want you to draw attention to the fact that we, over the years in TBTI, have produced quite a lot of pretty extensive studies of small-scale fisheries around the world. And we have produced a number of books that you may be aware of. If not, you can consult them on the Mare series at Springer. All these books are written they are edited volumes, and all the contributors are members of the extensive network that TBTI has built over the years. And they have come about by us publishing a call, inviting people to contribute, and in every time the interest in contributing to the books have been overwhelming, resulting in books that are not, there are really big books with more than 30 chapters. We did the same thing now with the new book, and we published this call, and people signed up, and people have delivered. And we are very happy to be able to announce here today that this book is almost done, and we hope that it will be out sometime in the fall, probably late fall. If I can get the next slide, I can go a bit into more detail. Well, here is the editors, me, Ratana, Alicia, and Muniba. And the title of the book is Blue Justice, Small-Scale Fisheries in a Sustainable Ocean Economy. If some of you attended the conference, the congress in Chiang Mai in 2018, you would have listened to Moniba speak, for instance, and other people speak to the fact that we need to look more systematically on justice issues as far as small-scale fisheries are concerned. We know that around the world, they are suffering from systemic injustice in many cases, and we need to understand how this works, especially now with the introduction of the blue economy, which is now all over the world, this concept. And it has been a concern of us to make sure that all this conversation we have about the future prospects of blue growth in the ocean economy does not take place outside the discussion we have about small-scale fisheries, especially now that we have the small-scale fisheries guidelines. We need to make sure in one way or another to link these two discussions so that the issues with regard to small-scale fisheries and how they might be affected in the blue economy become part of the same conversation. And how do we actually do that? Well, we think that this concept of blue justice is a way to sort of link these two conversations. First of all, blue justice is at the same level of abstract as the blue economy. It's easy to understand. Also, we are, of course, aware of the fact that justice is it's not a simple question. It has been an issue for a very, very long time, and philosophers have been discussing it since time immemorial, and there is a vast literature on justice, which we do believe have great relevance for the issues that we are dealing with in the context of the blue economy. You will see that we have in this book about 30 case studies from different parts of the world. We do believe, we work from the firm belief that whatever we may think of with regard to what is justice or not, these conceptual issues need to be closely embedded in the realities that people are experiencing around the world. This is not just an academic theoretical discussion, although that is, of course, worthwhile, but it needs to draw on the extensive experience that people have with regard to these issues in the blue economy. How does the blue economy works for them? And we do argue that whatever we think of what the blue justice and the blue economy is, it's not something that you can just express in words. You need rich narratives from real situations and communities around the world. You know, what does blue justice, what does that mean in that particular circumstance that people find themselves where the blue economy is being introduced with all that involves. So we have one of the things we did as we started to work on this, and this issue came up at the the MADA conference in 2019, that it would be a good thing to try to define it and get it into Wikipedia. And it was a suggestion that Rolf Willmann of FAO suggested that we should do, and we actually did it. And here, if you wonder how we are thinking about what Blue Justice is, you can get a quick introduction to it by consulting Wikipedia. There is, of course, a much more complex story about this concept that we are discussing in this book. But just let me say that we do talk about blue justice in a broad sense and not just in the narrow legal crime, law enforcement, IUU context, which is often where you find people, or where you find this concept. So we are thinking of blue justice in a broader sense. It's relational. It works at different levels. It is material, and it works in social relations and people's lives. So this is our perception of blue justice, and it runs through the whole book. Next slide, please. Yes. Well, we wanted a book that is not just a collection of stories. We want them to we want the different chapters to hang together. Theoretically and as well as the topic. So we want people to discuss these two concepts and how they are related to each other: blue justice and the blue economy. You will know from the books that we have produced that we have, when we in TBTI have been studying fisheries, we have applied a particular perspective that we draw from work we have done before we launched TBTI, and that is interactive governance. We, in other words, we look at small-scale fisheries as a governance system that we need to understand with all its intricacies and complexities and dynamics. And if you know a little bit of the language, the set of concepts that goes into this particular perspective, you will know that we are talking about the different governance orders. And this is what you are seeing in this table. There are three governance orders. The third one is about norms and principles. And if you wonder what that means in the context of small-scale fisheries, you just consult the small-scale fisheries guidelines and the guiding principles that introduces the guidelines. But there are, of course, in reality out there in fishery systems around the world, certain principles that are being introduced and implemented. At the second order, we talk about institutions and rules. And at the first order, we think about the daily interactions. You know, justice is also something that occurs in the daily interactions that people have with each other and with governments and all those actors that are somehow involved in organizing their communities and running their lives. We are particularly interested in to what extent there is a connection, an interaction between the three orders. And we would, of course, preferably see consistency running from the top and down, but we know that this is not necessarily the case. There is often inconsistencies and disjunctures within a particular system. When we study this more empirically, and we want to know more about it, and especially what happens in a particular system if there is a disjuncture, if there is no consistency between the orders. If, for instance, the principles, you do not see any trace of the principles at lower orders. And what we did when we published this call, we produced this table and we asked people to address it. Talk about blue justice from this particular lens. And you will see that we have a number of questions there in the right-hand column, which are examples of the kind of questions that we want them to discuss. So this is what the people have tried to produce good stories about in different parts of the world. Some have concentrated on one of the orders, while some have concentrated on all of them and how they connect. And this is the perspective that runs through the book. Is there another? That was all. Thank you very much. So we are very excited about this, and we are really happy to see the enthusiasm among our contributors as to this book and what it may lead to. As I said, it's almost done, and we hope that we will be able to submit within a month or two, and then we have to wait a few months, and then it will be out like the other books. And they are also in e-versions, and they are downloadable, also chapter by chapter if you. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Svein, for introducing that. So this is a sneak preview, right, of the book itself, kind of a world premiere as well, if you like. But let's now invite the videos. Let's now present the video of the first section, which would be about the 3 case studies. So we're gonna turn off our mic and the camera off. Camera off for now, please. We'll play the video first. Let's just turn our camera off for now. We're gonna play the video first.
Hello everyone, my name is Yinji Li from Tokai University, Japan. I'm also the coordinator of TBTI Japan Research Network. My chapter is about adopting a blue justice lens for Japanese small-scale fisheries. Important insights from the case of Inatori Kime fishery. This chapter considers a recreational fishing intrusion experienced by Kime fishers in a small fishing community, Inatori, to whom the Kime fishery is a bread and butter job as an injustice issue. At first glance, it is a problem only a tiny scale, impacting on a small amount of the fishing population that tends to be ignored. However, it's been made clear that this is not merely a coordination problem between professional and recreational fishery. It suggests the concerns of small-scale fisheries being left behind under an equality principle with the waning of the deference principle. Against the backdrop of the marine recreational boom from the 1980s, the questions and claims of equality and opening of the fishery rights, as with whose sea is it, why should only fishers have rights to use the seas, the use of the sea is citizens' rights, and the sea belongs to everybody, have been growing in Japan. And it's the author's view that the claims without proper understanding of the roles and meanings of small-scale fisheries and merely calling to abolish the fishery rights system are nonsense. Also, such a system of securing small-scale fishers' rights and citizens' use of the sea should not be understood as conflicting concepts. Inatori Kime fishers' strong sense of unfairness and injustice comes from the ongoing conflicts and interactions between the Kime fishers and recreational boat users. Although both Kime fishers and recreational boat users use the same fishery resource, fishery species, only one side of rules and regulations is formed. Well, where the former has rules of resource use, while the other has no such regulations. So implementing institutions and organizations to regulate recreational fishery and coordinate, manage these problems as a whole is needed, which will not be made sufficient without fully recognizing such injustice issues today. And to do that, it is necessary to show the legitimacy of the deference principle and disseminate it to society, as the SSF guidelines have indicated this point. If unable to do so, there will not be an essential problem solution, and Japan will be unable to build an appropriate governance system for achieving sustainability for small-scale fisheries. Thank you.
The Turks and Caicos Islands is a UK overseas territory in the wider Caribbean region. Our study demonstrates that small-scale fisheries are not always considered too big to ignore at a national level. In fact, as countries embrace blue growth, small-scale fisheries can be considered too small to include, and this creates injustice for fishers and fish workers. In the 1970s, the Turks and Caicos had a population of under 6,000 people, most of whom were directly or indirectly dependent on small-scale fisheries. However, since the rise of tourism in the 1980s, the country has undergone a major transformation. It has become a premier luxury tourist destination and center for offshore finance. It experienced some of the highest rates of economic growth in the world, and its population increased by over 700%. Being a tax haven and providing other incentives to foreign investors fueled this growth, but at the same time contributed to an extremely high cost of living and broadening socioeconomic divisions. Small-scale fisheries have been left behind and are now relatively insignificant to the economy. The fleet, fishing methods, and work conditions have not modernized substantially for freediving fishers in over 50 years. Fisheries management is critically under-resourced. Regulations are outdated. Fisherfolk organizations are lacking. Incomes for fishers and fish workers have not kept up with rising costs. Ex-vessel prices have stagnated, and it is hard to compete against cheap imported seafood. Jobs are now increasingly filled by low-paid foreign workers, mostly from neighboring Haiti. Once the bedrock of the economy, small-scale fisheries are now a relic from the country's past, and fisherfolk are marginalized. Tourism and biodiversity conservation are prioritized. Fishing is prohibited in approximately 50% of the coastline around the main inhabited islands. With the promise of overwater bungalows, reclaimed land, blue carbon initiatives, aquaculture, and possibly the oil and gas industry, blue growth is likely to further encroach upon traditional fishing grounds and exacerbate the pressure on fishing docks and landing areas, which are already feeling the effects of gentrification. In their current forms, small-scale fisheries will increasingly struggle to provide decent livelihoods. However, there are viable opportunities to improve blue justice and allow fisherfolk to benefit more from the country's growth and economic development. Implementing the FAO voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries and tailoring consultation processes to be more inclusive will ensure fisherfolk voices are heard in decision-making. Establishing cooperatives and other civil society organizations could further empower fisherfolk. To improve livelihoods, fishers can develop value-added markets specifically targeting the luxury tourist customer base. This includes emphasizing fresh, locally caught, high-quality, traceable, and stored seafood, adopting seafood certification programs, and diversifying fishing methods and species targeted. Fishers may also need to embrace tourism more directly, working as tour guides or elsewhere in the industry. However, as the Turks and Caicos embrace blue growth, securing an equitable role for small-scale fisheries in the blue economy will become increasingly challenging.
The short video summarizes the chapter showing the need to create epistemic rights, that is participatory epistemic rights to realize blue justice in Chile, considering the social movements of small-scale fisheries to participate in the creation of zones of aquaculture where it's appropriate or not in the salmon farms, as well as here in the north in the series of sacrificial zones where a series of industrial coal-powered copper smelting complexes in 28 different sites in 5 different bays are creating bays of death. For example, here in Mejillones, as we drive by one of those series, you can start to see how the contamination is increasing anoxic zones in the marine environment. Heavy metals such as cadmium, lead, as well as mercury are going out of these pipelines, as the one you can see below us now, creating shellfish bank deaths. Apparently around 500 hectares of natural shellfish banks have disappeared from the Mejillones Bay. Moving to the south of Chile, where there's been an expansion of 800% of salmon farms into the Patagonian southern 3 regions since 1990. Huge amounts of intensive salmon farms, such as the one you can see with the high stocking density in front of us now, have been exploding around the last frontiers. And this high stocking density, as well as contamination from feces and food and antifoulants, is creating in combination impacts with these mussel farms, which you can see as we circle around the south of Chiloé. All of these protests that have been generated being ignored. How here you can see a group of fishermen organising a further 28 protests in Quellón in an attempt to ensure that their concerns are noted. And this is in response also to a large-scale harmful algal bloom which occurred across the interior Chiloé Sea. We embarked on mapping, participatory cartography and SIG GIS to ensure that these observations could be credited with the government. Here in Maojing we're doing something similar as well as an attempt towards moving towards first order justice. However, these epistemic or pescistemic rights can't be achieved without significant reform of the institutional landscape here in Chile, but we're hoping with a new constitution that might be possible. Another example is the port expansion here in San Antonio. You can see that these wetlands are going to be built over as the port expands, and the contamination from the port continues to increase, impacting fishing communities and other different people as the amount of shipping accelerates.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that first set of video, Vesna. All right, so let me invite Martha to join a brief discussion here. I don't think Jeremy, our other author, is here at the moment. So Yinji, don't go. Yes, all right. So just wanted to ask you questions. Well, first, welcome to the session, and you can introduce yourself a little bit if you like. But basically, I am curious to hear what you think. I wanted you to speak a little bit about the kind of justice issues and challenges that you want to highlight with your case study. So perhaps we start with you, Yinji.
Okay. Hello again, everyone. I am Yinji Lee from Japan. So my case study was the injustice issue between small-scale fisheries and the marine recreational industry. And well, this is only an example. This case is only an example. And we see there are many hidden injustice issues regarding small-scale fisheries today in Japan. And as they are hidden, unapparent, so we do need correct power of the lens to look at the current situation. Well, one may wonder the Japanese small-scale fisheries are now facing marginalization as in other countries. Because they are organized and they have the fisheries cooperatives have great power and at the local levels, etc. Do they face injustice issues? And I argue it's a yes to the question, especially with the current situation. We had the new fisheries policy in Japan. It emphasized on the scientific method, or we call it number-oriented method on the resource management. and fisheries efficiency for achieving for a growth industry. So under such a situation, if not just, then what? If not now, then when? We do need blue justice in Japan now. Thank you.
Martha, where did you go? Sorry, don't turn on your camera off. Just stay here, please. Okay, let's hear a little bit about the case of Turks and Caicos.
Good afternoon. My name is Marta Calosso, and I co-founded Fisher Folk First, which is a small NGO based in the Turks and Caicos Islands. The NGO was set up to empower fisher folk and address the issues of blue justice that we describe in our chapter, and also briefly in the presentation that you just saw. In many ways, the economic development of the Turks and Caicos is an amazing success story, which has improved the lives of many Turks and Caicos Islanders. But unfortunately, small-scale fisheries have become collateral damage. The Turks and Caicos markets itself as a luxury tourist destination, having pristine environments and a strong commitment to conservation. However, in their current forms, small-scale fisheries are not consistent with this image. Instead, they are associated with poverty and neglect, and are seen as being at odds with marine conservation efforts. Commercial fishers and fish workers are marginalized, and they face a growing social stigma. In contrast, local seafood, conch, lobster, grouper, and snapper, is marketed as an integral part of the tourist experience, and it is generally sold at a higher price. But because seafood processing plants dominate the industry and dictate ex-vessel prices, most fishers do not currently benefit from value-added markets. Changing this dynamic is critical to improve the outlook for small-scale fisheries. Another systemic problem is that small countries like the Turks and Caicos struggle to provide government services, and the roles performed by civil society are also limited. This results in failures of governance at many levels, and ultimately leads to further injustice for small-scale fisheries, to fisher folk being neglected and their livelihoods being jeopardized.
Okay, so it's pretty obvious, right, that many of these issues are multifaceted and they're very complex, and they would need to be examined in details. And I think that's what we're going to go into next with our next set of video, to talk a little bit, to hear a little bit more of the case studies. And then the next set of discussion will be about how to unpack it. Okay, so I would thank you very much for this, and we'll bring you back at the roundtable discussion towards the end. So thank you. So Vesna, can you please play the second section of the video? So for our audience, if you would like to send questions, just please put them in the Q&A. Thank you.
Securing environmental sustainability and social inclusion of small-scale fisherfolk in coastal development and governance requires critical consideration of the existing legal framework and public policies that strive for social and environmental justice. Moreover, it is important to identify the required institutional reforms to face injustice given the legacy of historical loss in social and economic rights. Structural policies is still a systemic problem that endures over several political mandates and is a cornerstone for initiating contextualized policies and actions to meet social demands, dealing with wicked problems and weaknesses that persist in small-scale fisheries. It is a sector subject to several social environmental injustice and at the same time lacks robust social protection programs. Through case studies, we argue for the need of interactive governance to deal with the oil spill and the health crisis created by the COVID-19 pandemic. That is why we need to address institutional reforms aiming at building capacities. We also highlight the need for the empowerment of social movements linked to small-scale fisheries, and provide opportunities for expanding dialogue and building a positive agenda together with fishers and fish workers' international movements to better participate in fisheries governance. We suggest that the adoption of standards and principles is necessary to imbue the meta-order of fisheries governance in force in Brazil with a decentralizing effect in supporting grassroots initiatives of small-scale fisheries associations towards the first order of interactive governance. While we must believe in the possible and necessary transformation in the federal government, in the last years Brazilian public policies are moving in the opposite direction to the small-scale fisheries needs. These in turn remain alive and are the fishers' hope for the necessary transformations, whose aspirations have already been portrayed on the path to nationalize the small-scale fisheries guidelines in Brazil through the vital fishing strategy. Finally, we believe in the supporting role of civil society organizations to overcome the recent environmental disasters in Brazil, addressing blue justice issues through interactive governance lenses, illustrating how injustice of the recent past pervades the complexity of the governance system at national level, hindering the capacity of the ocean governance to appropriately address the struggles perceived by small-scale fishers. Strengthening fisherfolk networks and social movements can scale up their representation in multi-level fisheries management and broader governance processes. Fisherfolk communities have too often been left out or ignored in critical decision-making processes, severely damaging a cohesive sustainability agenda in the sector.
Olá a todos e a todas. O nosso estudo de caso examina os desafios para a construção de um sistema de governança interativa na região do estuário amazônico e zona costeira do estado do Pará, situada na região norte do Brasil. O objetivo é examinar políticas públicas que têm sido desenvolvidas pelo estado, visando o ordenamento da pesca nessa região e identificar os impactos dessas políticas para o setor pesqueiro como um todo, em especial para a pesca de pequena escala, identificando situações que configuram injustiça. A análise é guiada pela teoria da governança interativa da pesca e procuramos avaliar de que maneira essas políticas estão atendendo ou não as metas do Objetivo de Desenvolvimento Sustentável ou recomendações das diretrizes voluntárias para garantir a pesca sustentável de pequena escala. Alguns fatores foram identificados que apontam para a situação de injustiça que estão associadas a essas políticas. Elaboradas para o setor pesqueiro como um todo, elas apontam para contradições e têm sido ineficazes nos seus objetivos e também no processo de implementação, na medida em que atende apenas a um setor, que é o setor pesqueiro industrial, que tem sido priorizado por essas políticas e que realiza pesca de forma insustentável, causando graves impactos ao ambiente, impactos sociais, uma vez que reduz os estoques de espécies que são mais valorizadas no mercado, que também são alvo das atividades de pesca de pescadores de pequena escala. Com isso, esse setor tem sua capacidade de produção afetada, com perda de territórios também tradicionais por outros fatores, com dificuldade de acesso a recursos, e a renda. Configuram situação de injustiça, uma vez que eles mantêm relações de dependência com o setor pesqueiro industrial, se submetendo a uma relação de trabalho que implica em danos à sua capacidade de reprodução social. Atribuímos a baixa capacidade de organização dessa categoria, de ter sistemas eficientes de representação, né, que os permita garantir espaço nos fóruns de tomada de decisão em relação à pesca, ao ordenamento da pesca nessa região.
O estudo não identificou experiências de governança capazes de construir consensos sobre as demandas dos diversos agentes no setor pesqueiro dessa região, nem ações direcionadas à sustentabilidade social, econômica e ambiental da pesca de pequena escala. Algumas iniciativas conduzidas pelo governo estadual se pautam numa perspectiva de economia azul, que visa estimular a produtividade, mas sem foco na sustentabilidade socioambiental, sendo necessárias mudanças como a estruturação de instrumentos de avaliação, monitoramento e regulação para validar os princípios e valores da meta-ordem. Nossas recomendações apontam para a necessidade de fortalecer instituições que representam os interesses dos pescadores de pequena escala, em específico na necessidade de organização política e de parceria com outros agentes comprometidos com a sustentabilidade, defesa de seus territórios e qualidade de vida, para a elaboração de sistemas de governança interativa da pesca e estabelecimento de políticas públicas direcionadas ao setor pesqueiro, pautadas pelo princípio da justiça azul, abrangendo os diversos agentes e organizações que atuam nessa região.
Honorable Senators, members of the House of Commons, fellow Canadians, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs. At the same time, the government will look at continuing to grow Canada's ocean economy to create opportunities for fishers and coastal communities, while advancing reconciliation and conservation objectives. Investing in the blue economy will help Canada prosper.
Provincial Fisheries Minister Elvis Lovelace says he intends to meet with the Fisheries Licensing Board and other stakeholders to discuss the proposed sale of Quinlan Brothers to a foreign-owned company. But he stopped short of saying he'd stand in the way of the deal going through. The FFAW is asking government to stop the sale that would see Quinlan Brothers turn over control of their fish processing plants to Royal Greenland, a company owned by the government of Greenland.
And I signed off on the sale, and I believe it's moving in the right direction, and I look forward to what the results will be for those communities in terms of jobs and future, and I believe Royal Greenland will play a big part in that.
For hundreds of years, the fishery has been the backbone of our rural communities and a major contributor to our provincial economy. Yet, it appears our provincial government still doesn't get it. How else to explain its decision to approve a deal that allowed Royal Greenland, a crown corporation owned by the government of Greenland, to become the single largest seafood processor in Newfoundland and Labrador? What this means is that major control of our fishery has been given to a foreign government. This bad decision threatens our fishery and the rural communities it supports.
Now to Nova Scotia and the violence over the lobster catch. Indigenous fishers are pushing ahead with their self-regulated lobster fishery and threaten legal action against those who stand in the way. At the heart of the issue are the rights of Indigenous lobster harvesters to fish outside the commercial season, rights protected by the Marshall decision, a Supreme Court of Canada ruling.
Indigenous fishers guard a driveway to a lobster holding pound as police screen nearby traffic to rule out potential troublemakers. Bitterness simmers from Tuesday night when an angry group of commercial fishers threatened an Indigenous harvester, attacking property and removing his lobsters in full view of the RCMP.
Sabaganagati First Nation is calling on provincial and federal governments to recognize their right to sell their catch of the moderate livelihood fishery. The Mi'kmaq fishers have been fishing for 1 week, but Canada says any catch outside the commercial fishery is illegal to sell. Today, Chief Sack said the Mi'kmaq have the right to trade and sell.
We're looking to proceed with a lobster buying license of our own that we're going to issue. And that we're looking for them to change the legislation and any acts that they may have to comply with our right and for them to uphold our right to do so.
Thank you for that. Now I would invite our three speakers of the case studies, Sergio, Edmir, and Evan. Why don't you join us on the screen here? Okay. Sergio, you wanted to just say something to Edmir so that he might be able to join in Spanish? Oh, sorry, in Portuguese.
Yes.
Perfect. Great.
Yes, that can help.
Okay.
I can try.
Edmir, would you like to turn on your camera too? Okay.
You can see me?
Not yet, but it's coming, I'm sure. Okay, so I had thought that no, we don't see you. I saw black. I don't know why. Work on it a little bit, please. I don't know exactly where you're sitting. You should be able to see yourself as well. Okay, so serious stuff here, right? We're talking again, quite heavy topics that really require a very rigorous way of examination. And I'd like to invite each of you to speak a little bit about that. Sergio, you did bring the context of governance, you talk about the principles. How useful is it to really look at, how important is it to look at these justice issues in a very systematic and holistic way? Can you speak a little bit about that? And please introduce yourself first, quickly.
Okay, nice to meet you again. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure also to use this shirt that I use it. So during such meeting that TBTI, it's able to do it. Unfortunately, sorry if I cannot speak very well, because I just received a notice that a very good friend of I and a lot of you know him. Fabio Azin just passed away. He got COVID 10 days ago, and he was considered by the medical team with a cerebral death. So I'm quite surprised that we were following. He had some recovery 2-3 days ago, but unfortunately this happened from yesterday to today. But in his memory, I think that he would like me to continue with this. And although a good friend, he is one of the best researchers I ever know. So what can I say besides what we said in the video? I would like to thank Mariana Matos, who recorded the video and organized the photos. So she had a very good job on placing our ideas. And what else can I say about this? That although we placed two disasters we had in the recent past, the oil spill and the COVID-19 pandemic, with disproportionately, I can say, disregard the fishing community. We bringing the blue just concept could let us to see better how injustice is affecting the fishing communities. But this is, we can consider this in a way like isolated situations that don't occur on a daily basis. So what we have really on a daily basis here, and I can bring you two wicked problems that we have, that we face it in a day-to-day basis. One is the fishing struggle of fishers for fishing territories, and also what we consider here a struggle to understand better how conservation effort is doing with fishing communities. There is alleged private owners in coastal areas that threat the integrity of small-scale fisheries. This is a daily situation that we face here. Fishing territories, small-scale fishing territories, where they live, where they work, is in a day-to-day facing threats due to political and economic reasons. This is a very wicked situation that we have here. Also, we would like to bring the ideas and discussion about conservation issues. We are not saying that that conservation is not important. Of course, it is. It is something that we must bring in a day-to-day basis. But also, we need to see how fishers themselves perceive the policies of conservation is affecting them. So it's not a matter, as I said, not denying conservation, but it's a matter of bringing the compassion that some voices are placing conservation over human rights, I can say, fisher rights. So what fishers think about this? It is something that we are bringing and for this consideration. So what I can say there also, so we can, just to finalize, I think that our chapter could bring a situation that we are not following norms. We have it on papers, but we are not following it, the norms and principles we have.
Mm-hmm.
But we may lead for situation or institutional weaknesses, and civil society organizations and fishing communities are trying to recycle this and bring in a discussion on how to overcome this situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry for that.
That's all right. Evan, can you speak quickly on the case study and how you apply these three-order justice governance lens to look at the case studies, please?
Sure, thank you. My name is Evan Andrews. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Ocean Frontier Institute, working in Memorial University in St. John's, Canada. So in our chapter, we worked through interactions within and across orders, governance orders, and it was a really useful way to assess and compare the root causes of the fishery struggles you learned about in our short video. At the time we were writing, these cases were really contentious and so hot, almost untouchable. And by focusing on the governance roots of the cases, interactive governance provided a way to sort of thread through that contention to begin unpacking the overwhelming kind of complexity of the cases. You know, these cases have long histories, and if you drew them out on a timeline, which we did, it'll tell you what happened, but it doesn't tell you why, particularly in terms of governance. So we needed to look at another dimension of the case, a sort of vertical unpacking of governance by examining interactions that trickle up and trickle down across governance orders. And by doing so, even though these two cases were seemingly occurring independent of one another, it gave us a strong sense across both cases that those fishery struggles, including amplified perspective of injustice, arose from unclear principles and contradictions across the three orders about the meaning and importance of those principles. And so how to proceed from that is that it revealed some learning lessons and pathways to advance blue justice in those cases, and certainly beyond, and in a context of struggle that you might anticipate in a blue economy. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, I know we have a little bit of time. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to move on to the next section of the video, also because Edmir's microphone doesn't seem to work. So let's play another set of video, Vesna, and then we will return to the panelists to ask further questions.
Good day. Our presentation is on small-scale fishers in the time of COVID-19, reinforcing the inequalities in the food, economic, and governance systems in South Africa and Zimbabwe. The study looked at the lockdown regulations, which were implemented to curb the spread of COVID-19 in South Africa and Zimbabwe, and how they affected the small-scale fishers. And the main observations from the study were that systemic inequalities, which are a result of the neoliberal governance system, were laid bare by the COVID-19 pandemic. The small-scale fishery was worst affected among other economic sectors because there were no grants that were provided, and the imposed lockdown regulations restricted post-harvest activities, which is where women are mostly found. And during the lockdown, women had to carry additional household responsibilities, their social reproductive role, due to the patriarchal system. And the inequalities are fueled by interlocking factors on the livelihoods and food security, such as market system, corporate power, role of the state, rights and tenure systems.
In order to address this, we have a few recommendations that are key. One of them is to transform the governance system to address the interlocking factors that fuel injustice. And this is found in the meta order. And whether we talk of the COVID-19 or the blue economy injustice for the small-scale fishery, as we see them to be similar in nature. Another one at the second order level is the transformation of institutions. This will need to align with the adopted governance system to create sustainable livelihood opportunities and the support for small-scale fishers throughout the supply and the value chain. The tricky one, which we find in the first order, is resolving the gender inequalities and discrimination. This one will need the confrontation of societal norms such as patriarchy in the community and at household level. Combined, the mentioned recommendations address all three orders of governance and will make the small-scale fishery sustainable and promote blue justice in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone joining us on this SSF open house. My name is Sifasa Sare. Dr. Jamal Maitonam Kasa and I are the contributing authors of Chapter 25, Conflicts in the Artisanal Fishing Industry of Ghana, Reactions of Fishers to Regulatory Measures. Fisheries in Ghana supports 10% of our 30 million population and provides 50% of our average per capita intake of animal protein. The artisanal or small-scale fisheries sector in Ghana contributes 67% of the marine fish landed in Ghana. The small-scale sector also employs over 100,000 fishers. So this makes it by far one of the most important sector in Ghana in terms of employment and nutrition. Over the years, overcapacity due to increase in effort, unsustainable fishing method, and high demand for small pelagic species have led to decline of the small pelagic species that is the mainstay of our small-scale sector. So our chapter contribution looks at the challenges in the sector, the management regime from pre-colonial days to post-colonial times, and the resulting first governance order conflicts in the small-scale fisheries sector. We go on to highlight the interventions in the sector geared towards moving to third governance order and achieving blue economy where small-scale fishers can sustainably exploit the fisheries. We go on to propose options to maintain the third governance order, and we advocated for blue justice where conflicts are promptly resolved and participation in fisheries decision making is made inclusive. We hope you find our contribution insightful and the entire compilation in this book useful for your engagement with our industrious small-scale fishers across the globe. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Nigeria is blessed with 852-kilometer coastline, which makes it an ocean, which prepares it and gives it opportunity for an ocean-based economy. The blue economy has become an important issue globally. So the idea of a blue justice in the blue economy is very apt. And the chapter I've contributed here is Perception and Reality of Justice in the small-scale fisheries of Nigeria. It highlights the various injustices that the small-scale fishers currently face, in spite of their millions either involved in pre-harvest and post-harvest activities. The injustices highlighted include inappropriate compensation arising from gas and oil pollution, issues of incursion by industrial fleets into the 5 nautical miles, and issues of piracy and IUU. The highlight of the book is to show that presently the small-scale fishers have a perception that the activities are surrounded by a lot of injustice that affects their livelihood. Now, as Nigeria transits to a blue economy, the view here in the book is that many changes must occur, particularly in the second order governance system. The second order governance system here is the institution which are supposed to offer support and ensure that there is no injustice to the small-scale fishers. All of these are addressed here, and the highlight is that globally there are gaps between the meta order and the second order governance framework, and this affects practitioners of small-scale fisheries in Nigeria and globally. And these institutions must be strengthened to protect, to ensure that issues of injustice are dealt with. Thank you.
Blue justice and responsive governance require the empowerment of men and women in small-scale fisheries for individual and collective action.
I am Nadia Ngom. The Academy taught us a lot of things. We learned how to manage our life, how to avoid the waste of income. I can say that it has motivated me to work more and look for solutions to increase my income.
Just like Nabia, many other workers involved in fisheries have become members of the Academy. Everyone is welcome. This initiative engages fishermen, women in fishing, processing and marketing, wholesalers, retailers, social regulatory bodies, and connected professions, including administrators and scientists. The Small-Scale Fisheries Academy is a safe, multi-actor platform for respectful dialogue, joint learning, co-creation of knowledge, and innovation for the recovery, protection, and sustainable use of marine and coastal resources and prosperous artisanal fisheries. The Small-Scale Fisheries Academy provides operational support for the implementation of the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries. All of the Academy's activities start with a visioning exercise. Vision inspires and guides planning. Without a clear vision, it is difficult to imagine where you're going, and it is easy to become discouraged by the challenges that will arise along the way. Nabia, to the right, is explaining a collective drawing, exposing what constitutes a happy life for her micro-fishmonger group. Nabia started visioning herself in 1 year's time selling 6 crates of fish per week and being the owner of a motorbike to make the transportation of her products easier. Before her participation in the training, she could only market 1 fish crate per week. Following the plan she drew, in the first 3 months, she reduced her expenses for new clothes and phone credit, which allows her to buy more fish and market 2 crates a week. While the pandemic caused many challenges, she has been able to carry on with her business, opting to diversify her products, now including dried fish. After 1 year, she has been able to use some of her profit to improve her house's rooftop. The inclusive visual exercises support the exploration of individual and collective pathways for change. Recognizing their knowledge and experiences, the process brings to light taboo topics and enables the identification of opportunities for improvement of life and working conditions. It promotes catalyzing energies for tangible changes towards gender and social blue justice. The Academy promotes respectful dialogue between different actors in the value chain in small-scale fisheries.
We learned a lot of things at the Academy. We hope, by the grace of God, to make use of it to the benefit of our families. Inshallah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those very nice videos. Okay, so can I, let's invite Muniba, Jemima, and Cephas, Akintula, and then Cornelia and Fernanda. Oh, sorry, Maria Fernanda. Big session here, but we're just going to chat a little bit here, right? About, you have presented really nice case studies. Now we wanted to hear what you think about what it takes, right, for us to transition to blue justice that would really help small-scale fisheries in your case studies. Can we start from Muniba? Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ratana, and thanks for the invitation. It's really nice to speak to my colleagues on the continent and also those who are joining across the world. Ratana, I think that when we're talking about transitioning to the blue economy, I think we need to acknowledge that the first blue revolution that took place in fisheries is the investment in the big fishing companies and industries. And this is from governments, from the north to south governments. And this caused the biggest challenge to small-scale fisheries in terms of one of the biggest challenges still in terms of encroaching on their space. The second biggest crisis is the food crisis in 2008. And we saw how that also, where fish became the most traded commodity, the need for the cold chain, that Europe wanted fresh fish in a very short space of time. So we look at the activities of salting and drying and smoking is becoming less and more focused on the high value species and the cold chain. So the marketization and the commodification of the fish is another big problem for small scale fishers as we transition. Of course, the blue economy is not a friend of small scale fishers. No matter how we want to justify that blue economy brings in oil and brings in foreign direct investment and it brings jobs, it is not a friend of the blue economy, and it's particularly how the marine spatial planning has worked. I want to also add to the fact that the environmental crisis has been used to exclude people via marine protected areas outside, away from their land, away from the areas where they have to fish. And that is also a big challenge. Added to all of this, in our particular case study, is this health crisis of COVID-19 that showed us how all of the other crises are used to kind of exclude small-scale fisheries. So if we want to transition to a blue justice, we need to factor in all of these challenges and these that are facing. So the lens of a blue justice is a bigger lens, as Sven is saying. It is also that it is a process. It's not just a movement or a campaign, it's a process of legal, relational issues, governance issues that we all need to factor in. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Jemima and Cephas, could you do that quickly, please, on your case? What do you see as opportunities as we are transitioning? Jemima, you go ahead, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Jemima Tonam Kasa. I'm a fisheries scientist who has worked on small pelagic species in Ghana and co-authoring together with Cephas. So I'll let Cephas say something first and then I'll come back and add a few words.
So Cephas, you want to say something? Turn your mic on.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be a part of this program. So things that we need to do as we transition into blue economy and then sustain blue justice within that space. I'll always like to start with legislation's rules governing the fishing space. Our rules and regulation need to begin to move and then recognize the rights of our small-scale fishers and incorporate tools that provide guidance as to how we address conflicts and challenges within the space. And one very good tool or guidelines is the one from FAO on the SSF guidelines. And also we can move a step further to look at the VGGT guidelines as well. These two guidelines, I believe, provides us enough posture to address issues that are emanating within the small-scale fisheries and ensure that we sustain blue justice as we all, accelerate or move towards a blue economy. And in talking about laws, it's important that our consultation, we talk about inclusiveness, participation of small-scale fishers in decision-making processes, shift from that kind of participation that is just tokenistic in approach. We need to look at a holistic way that we engage our small-scale fishers so that their needs and issues that are arising within that space are adequately, addressed so that we can ensure that the benefits from the resource that they depend on. So I think I'll let Jemima also add a few points to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Jemima. Keep it.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much, Cephas. So our chapter talks about the need for greater collaboration between all stakeholders in the fisheries industry, especially because our small-scale fishers have always felt left out. So anytime there are regulatory measures, they kick against it because they feel there's some social injustice. A typical case in question is when the government of Ghana decided to implement a closed fishing season for the artisanal fleet, and the fishers kicked against it because they asked why the industrial trawlers were not part of that. And so the good thing is that after the fishers kicked against that, there have been a lot of consultations behind the scenes. And just this Friday, last Friday, there's finally been consensus. And then now the fishers have agreed to go for a 1-month closed fishing season. And the industrial trawlers are also going to have a closed season for 2 months. So we're beginning to see the results that are coming from greater collaboration in the fisheries sector of Ghana.
That's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Akintula, what's the situation in Nigeria? Can you say quickly, is there hope?
Okay, thank you for a brilliant job you've done over the years using the platform of the TBTI. Otherwise, the voice from Nigeria may never have been heard. So great effort. Yeah, there's hope as long as we are able to ensure that there's transformation in the institutions. Typically, Nigeria is an oil-based economy. So you have issues such as oil pollution, and when the oil pollution do occur, what comes to the small-scale fisheries? Nothing, virtually nothing. So you talk about issues of even the industrial fleets coming into the 5 nautical miles that have been provided for the small-scale fishers. What happened? Nothing. So when you look at all of these challenges or marginalization, whichever way you look at it, in our book, in this book, what the argument I have put forward is that Nigeria as a system has no problem with issues of justice if from our constitution, we follow what the constitution says. The constitution is clear that it wants everybody to have equity distribution to whatever livelihood or assets you pursue. But the challenge comes in the institution. So from the meta order, we don't have a problem. But when it comes to the second order, that is where the challenges come. So moving from the second order to the third order, you see that when there are conflicts between the fishers and other users of these common pool resources, it is always that the fishers loses out. And why this is because the institutions such as the Ministry for Agriculture, such as the legislative system to transit to a system where the fishers can actualize their dream are just not in place. So there are so many issues that were brought out in my contribution to the chapter. But to specifically answer your question, hope lies in being able to ensure that these institutions are made to awake to their responsibility to ensure that where there are conflicts, simple, the constitutions are there. The legal system must understand the need to what it costs if a man loses his livelihood to air pollution and the rest of them. So what I have called for in this chapter is that there should be institutional reforms in all of those institutions that daily the fishermen at the level of the third order interact with. Fishers want to do their business and ensure that they live happily with others. This is just the call. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have heard some very cool example, of course, from the production here by Maria Fanda and Cornelia. Why don't you speak briefly about that? Because I think that is a really great example about transitioning to blue justice. I invite now Maria Fernanda and Cornelia. I don't know who wants to start first.
Perhaps I start with my opening statement would be that when we engaged after many different types of test activities over the years to concentrate on a platform, a dialogue and co-learning and co-production of knowledge platform, we worked on the assumption that government policies, not only in Senegal, but in most countries, are favorable to industrial. They follow industrial models and progressively marginalize small-scale fishers. Example is the huge amount of subsidies that are annually spent on long-distance fleets, and the measure of lowering losing or reducing productivity and profitability in the small-scale fisheries. We observe and are documented in Senegal and elsewhere. So when you look at this time series, if you wish, empirically, you see that the solution will not come top-down. Because we have a lot of very good talks and good intentions and everything, but it just doesn't work out. So we thought, if these things are not being experienced and claimed actively, bottom up as well, we chase an illusion that things will come, mysteriously or by fiat from blue economy or something else. And this is why the emphasis is on the actors that in the small-scale fisheries themselves, not only the men, but the women and everybody along the value chain, to accompany them for more critical assessments, organization, and improve their lives individually and collectively. And it is this experience that they can make through their own lives, their practice, that really lays the foundation for this change. Because of the importance of being inclusive there through the graphical recording and the design methods, I think it would be important that Maria Fernanda sketches out a little bit how come people like Nadia have been able to succeed even though the micro parameters were all stacked against her, with the policy, with the COVID and everything. Yet she and several others succeeded. So I think this is a sort of line we want to work on, and we stretch out our hands as well to work with others, because we need to test that sort of things in other places to check on scalability. If it works only in one place, well, it's fantastic, but not good enough. So, but let's hear from Maria Fernanda.
Only very briefly, though. Just a few words, Maria Fernanda.
I like what Cornelia just said, but I think we are just starting focus on people. So the change starts with everyone and each one. And when they are create a situation when they can see their own lives and reflect on that, they find a way to change small pieces individually, but never stop there, because brings change. So she motivates family and also the community, the economic groups or the associations, fisheries associations. So it's catalytic. So let's try other places. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's pretty obvious that many of these justice issues take place at all levels, all actors, in most cases small-scale fisheries, but not in isolation. There's other actors involved as well, as we've seen since the start. And then the solutions or transition would also require a lot of thinking around this. We only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to ask other in the panelists to join, put your camera on, you wanted to join the conversation. We still haven't really seen Edmer yet, so Edmer, if you'd like to join. And I should also mention that the attendees, there's a lot of our authors are listening as well. So if any of the attendees would like to say something, the book authors, if you want to say something, just raise your hand and then we'll let you speak. But is there any question at all from the audience? Please put that in the chat. And then we have a question from an audience. Could you just type that question in, whoever has your hand up, okay? Just so that we can all see it, just type it in. That way, if we don't have time to answer it live, we can always answer you in the chat later. Edmer, would you like to say something about your case study? You definitely can speak to either the issue or the analytical lens, or also the transition, if you like. But Sven, if you'd like to turn your camera back on, this is the final round. So anyone wants to say something in this final round, I'll invite you to go ahead, please. Just, raise your hand. Thank you, Maria Fernanda, for providing the answer to Teresa. Okay, so that Teresa question was actually about whether fishers don't know if they will actually have these issues of injustice happening to them. So thank you for that example. All right, there's only 4 minutes left. This is the first time actually that the authors are getting together like this, and we're seeing the video for the first time as well. And it's been fantastic. Similar to the contribution itself, the chapters, the case studies, the videos were also invited, right? So people were, welcome to do it. And of course, not everybody had a chance to do it yet, but if in the future you're able to do that, we definitely would keep using that video, right? Because I think it's a nice way to communicate. Well, here we have a question from our audience. He's saying that working in the Sundarbans and read many articles where many ecologists in the name of conservation want to depopulate the area. So this is about displacement, right? We have this one particular theme in Too Big to Ignore earlier about defending the beach, and simply because people are being displaced, and this in the case of ocean grabbing that Muniba had talked about earlier. Anyone would like to answer in terms of how to manage this situation? But let me just open that up to how do we want to manage situation where small-scale fisheries are being marginalized, displaced, disadvantaged in the context of blue economy, and also in even in the context of regular, in the context of conservation, in the context of other kind of development that is happening in the place that they work. Anybody would like to answer this question? Our panelists? Again, I've invited all speakers to become panelists at this time. Can I get someone to answer this question? Go ahead, Cornelia, please.
Yeah, I think the key is really to focus on people and to accompany them, listen to what their priorities are, not what our preconceived ideas are perhaps, or what we may have learned somewhere else, but listen first to what is important to them at that point in time, and work with them to get more self-confidence, learn how to speak in a bigger group, collaborate across with more than one profession along the value chain, and learn and get the sense of empowerment so that their voice can be heard and will be heard. I think that's really key, and do that in a very inclusive and culturally sensitive way. Wonderful. That is also key, so that, because you always have some who are a bit more articulate than others, and it's important that everybody has a voice.
All right. Moniba, you wanted to add something to that?
I just want to say that, as we unpack the concept of blue justice, I think that we also need to unpack the concept of conservation and how we implement conservation, how ecologists think of conservation, how the blue economy think of conservation, because conservation over and over are part of excluding people from their livelihood, and also, as you said, Ratana, in terms of defending the beach. They are removed for adventure tourism to come and play, and for elite tourism, and people are removed. I do think that it is also important to unpack that notion of conservation.
That's a great point. So there's a lot of opportunities for us as we are trying to understand more this issue of blue justice to really look at those multiple lenses and multiple perspectives, right? The different opinion that we see around in the conversation of blue economy. And now if we look more broadly, outside the small scale fisheries, we'll start to see many more issues that would need to be addressed. And what Cornelia said earlier about trying to provide a platform and a forum of mechanisms for engagement in a way that is inclusive and also transparent, I would also add, right? Just so that we know that who's saying what, who wants what, whose goals and objectives are this blue economy anyway. Okay, we actually are coming to the end of our session, and I wanted to see whether, Sven, you'd like to have a final word, given that you are the main editor of this book, and then we will close the session.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this session is great, and it gives another perspective on written text. So I really appreciate all these presentations and the intervention. I just wanted to add a small comment to the last discussion that we had, and I think it is. I think it's important to say that some of these arguments that have been made here and some of these observations that are presented here, they didn't start yesterday. You know, there's been an ongoing discussion and empirical research and argumentation and social struggle that has been going on for a long time. Luckily, that process resulted in the small-scale fisheries guidelines, which is a landmark achievement, you know. And when I get that question, you know, what should we tell governments? What should we tell those in power with regard to what might bring a better future? I used to say, implement the guidelines. You know, why don't you start there? States have, after all, endorsed the guidelines, and they do have, if not a legal, so at least a moral obligation to implement what they have said they will. So I think people like us, have a role in keep reminding governments what they actually did when they endorsed the guidelines. It was not just a symbolic act. It was something that the world of small-scale fisheries expect the governments to actually live up to what they have promised. So also in the context of the blue economy, I have argued that if the states do nothing to implement the small-scale fisheries guidelines, you know, the blue economy will come at a loss to small scale. You know, we know that. We don't need to document. We know that this will happen. So therefore, it is important that we bring the guidelines into the discourse about the blue economy, because they certainly belong there, but they are not there for some peculiar reasons. I think you know, many see it as in their interest to keep these two things separate, and I think we have to, as an obligation, to bring them together and raise all these issues that we have been talking about here and which are discussed in the small-scale fisheries guideline into that discourse, and remind governments that they cannot disregard or forget about the guidelines. They have, after all, endorsed them. And when they talk about the blue economy, they should also talk about small-scale fisheries. And the way to do them is to remind them that there is something called blue justice.
That's right. And then if they don't read the guidelines, they should be reading the Blue Justice book that we would soon hit the shelf. And of course, the more we do any of these communicating using these multimedia, it will be easier for them to grasp and to appreciate what it means. And hopefully they will be able to figure it out, how to really do better, right, at being more inclusive and just making sure that there's a lot of equity and all the good principles about the guidelines are there as well. So I would like to thank all the panelists for the really great presentation today, and our audience as well. And like I said, a lot of the authors have been listening as well. So the book will soon be released. We'll send news about that. And of course, stay in touch and follow our work, and then you would learn a lot about what we can do together to help improve the situation for small-scale fisheries and making them sustainable and viable. So have a good day, evening, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.